Good evening to the Cranleigh community. I know some of you are joining just after dinner time or putting the children down, so a massive, massive welcome and a huge warm welcome to those maybe far away that are joining us outside of the Cranleigh community. I feel very, very honoured to be here this evening, and I just want to talk a little bit more about our honoured guest. Jessica Smith is a Paralympic swimmer, motivational speaker and children's author, combining her experience as an elite sports person with her academic achievements from both the University of Wollongong and INSEAD. Jessica is a powerful voice when it comes to diversity and inclusion. She has been internationally recognised for her work, awarded many accolades for her commitment and activism, including her most recent award, the Medal of Order of Australia, the highest level of recognition bestowed on an Australian. Tonight, Jessica will talk about her life, which is full of trials and tribulations, but it's the work she does today that we look forward to hearing the most. Her ability to educate society about the importance of embracing difference and diversity in a gentle and respectful way. Welcome, Jessica. It's wonderful to have you and to be part of the Cranleigh community this evening. I know our principal, Michael Wilson, will say a big thank you at the end, but I just want to say how humbled and honoured I am to be in presence with yourself. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and I can't wait for our community to hear your words of wisdom.
Thank you so much. It is an absolute pleasure for me to connect with all of you tonight. To be honest, I'm still finding my way when it comes to this new style of presenting online. It's challenging not to be able to read, engage an audience. And for those of you who have seen me present in person, you will know that I have a very different style to the Tony Robbins of motivational speakers. I have a much calmer presence, and I try to deeply connect with my audience. And I do that because I want my audiences to feel comfortable and nurtured, because I talk about a lot of things that can be quite triggering to some people. So it's important that I create an atmosphere where people feel safe and they feel relaxed. And so I really hope that I can emulate that through the screen tonight. I also will rely on slides and imagery tonight. And sometimes when I'm presenting on stage, I may or may not refer to slides, but I think given the context and having an online session, it's important for you to see imagery. It's important for you to see my physical appearance and the fact that I only have one arm, because it's a part of my body that I am most proud, especially considering that society has told me to always be ashamed and to try and hide the way that I look. And so tonight I'll refer to mainly just pictures and a video later on to keep it fun. But I think the imagery is important, given that tonight we're talking about opportunities for you to look beyond what you first see. And so I hope that I can take you on a journey this evening that allows you to open your eyes and your heart and your mind to new possibilities. And so to begin my presentation, when I am on stage, there is an image that I display, and this is it, before I walk out. And I ask the audience a question: do you think I'm beautiful? And it's a rhetoric question, because I immediately then walk out onto stage, and I think perhaps the next slide, and people can see the fact that I only have one arm and that I have scars on my neck and chest. And so the next question I ask the audience is, what about now? For those people who thought that I did look beautiful in that original image, now that you see my physical appearance, has your perception of me changed? And of course, these are questions that I don't want the answer to, but it's important that we think about it, because the thing is, just by looking at me, you know absolutely nothing about me. You might think that you do, but you don't. We can only ever make assumptions based on what we first see. And so it's really important that you see that I'm proud of my body and the way that I look. And I want all of you to to learn through what I say tonight, and the fact that my life has been enriched because of my differences and my disability, not the other way around. And I think that's a really important message for all of us, no matter how old you are, no matter what your background is. And so it's important for me to have these images here tonight so that you can see what I look like. And I pose those questions to all of you tonight. You know, has your idea of me or of other people that you see changed when you see a full picture? The fact that we can only make assumptions based on what we first see is really, really important, because if I was to ask another question, that being, what do you see when you look at me? Your answer should be factual. So it should be a female, blonde hair, one arm, green eyes, two legs, wearing black, or whatever it is in those particular pictures. Factual, no emotion. But of course, emotion comes into it. Emotion comes into everything, and our emotions are impacted by so many different factors. And so what we need to be able to do is then think beyond that, because I'm sure that a lot of you are sitting there and your mind is filling with other terminology as well that you want to use to describe me, words that society has told you to believe to be true about somebody with a difference. So words such as disabled, disfigured, injured, hurt, less than, incapable. Phrases such as, oh my goodness, maybe she can't do things, maybe she struggles in life. But then there's probably other people sitting there tonight thinking, oh no, I don't see any of that. I see somebody who is brave, somebody who's inspirational, somebody who, there aren't imperfections, only perfections. And you're probably feeling quite good about yourself because that's positive terminology. But what if I was to tell you that I didn't actually feel comfortable with any of those words or phrases? Because it's based on something that you can't possibly know. So when you look at me, you know nothing about my capabilities. So it's important that we try to change the terminology that we're using when we first see somebody. Because when you label me as disabled, that means that you think there's something I cannot do. But also when you label me as inspirational based on only what you first see, that's also insulting. And so the reason I find those phrases to be complex and to be problematic is because the intent behind them is questionable. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's the way society views difference and disability. And that's what I want to challenge you all on tonight, because I'm proud of my parents, I'm proud of my body, and my capabilities are something that can't be seen when you first look at me. And I refuse to be limited in my life because my body doesn't fit the societal limitations of what beauty standards are. What if I was to tell you that, in fact, I'm quite successful? And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. As a female living with a disability and now as a mother, it's really important that I own my achievements. So if I tell you that I'm a Paralympian, I'm an author, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I graduated from university with a science degree, I can do push-ups and burpees. And as was mentioned by Natasha in the intro, I have recently been awarded one of Australia's highest honours, the Order of Australia Medal, for my work within the community and activism. I wonder how many of you would have assumed that those accolades were possible and that I, as someone living with a disability, was able to achieve all of that. Did it surprise you? Now, again, these are not questions that I want you to answer, but I want you to think about, not just when you see me, but when you see difference in all its shapes, sizes, and varieties in everyday life. Because how you view the world directly impacts how you view yourself. I now view the world with so much grace and gratitude and empathy, and my wish is for a world that practices patience and understanding and accepting of what's different, a human race that is free from prejudice, bigotry, and discrimination. And I've been searching for that my entire life, but for many years I was looking for it in the wrong places. I was looking for external validation, people to help me overcome the issues I was having with my identity and my body image. I wanted people to tolerate my differences before I was willing to accept them. And that led me down a path of discontentment and resentment and loneliness. I eventually learnt that in order to practice a life of inclusivity and acceptance, that I had to practice what I preached. I had to walk the talk, and I had to implement what I wanted in my life, my own desires in what I was doing, and not just expect that of others. So I might ask now for the next slide. It's a compilation of images. I was born missing my left arm. And to this day, there's been no explanation as to why that occurred. It was just one of those unfortunate things. Back 30 odd years ago, you know, the scans and the technology wasn't like what it is today. And so my parents had no idea that they were expecting their first child with missing a limb. When I was born, the doctors told my mum and dad that in order for me to have a normal childhood, that it would be best to have me fitted with a prosthetic limb from as young as possible. And so my parents, wanting to give me the very best start at life, said, of course. And at just 18 months of age, I was fitted with my first prosthetic limb. Now, back in those days, again, going back to the early 80s, technology was nothing like what it is today. And so I had a prosthetic limb that I needed to be sort of suctioned onto my arm, and it wrapped around my head and my entire body. And I'm sure you can imagine, for a young toddler, it was very awkward and clunky and heavy, and it was hard to get used to. It was actually very difficult for me to retrain my brain into thinking that I had an arm. And I remember one day that this so-called aid led to probably the most traumatic event in my life. I was in the kitchen with my mum, and she was making biscuits, and she had just boiled the kettle, which I was oblivious to. But I noticed a plate of biscuits up on the bench, and being a curious toddler, I wandered over, and using my new amazing arm, I reached up. But because I couldn't feel or detect heat, I had no idea that I had actually knocked the kettle over. And unfortunately, I spilled boiling water onto myself, and I sustained third-degree burns to 15% of my body. You can see a little image there now. And it was horrific. My mum, you know, doing what she thought was right in the moment, trying to get the arm off, took all my clothes off. And I apologise for people who are eating dinner. It's a little bit graphic, but when she did that, all of my skin came off as well. I was rushed to the Sydney Children's Hospital, where we were living at the time, and I underwent blood transfusions and immediate skin grafting. So they had to remove skin from my thighs, and the only way that they could attach that to my neck and chest was to staple it. It's pretty horrific, and I had to wear compression garments for years later, and I was in and out of hospital for a long time. Thankfully, I don't remember the trauma of that event, but it has certainly come up many times in my life since then. And basically, you know, growing up knowing that I was different, knowing that my body didn't look like my younger brothers. And what's worse, I suppose, was that imagine being a child, hearing the murmurs of adults speaking around you but not to you, using words such as disabled and different, and phrases such as, you know, life's going to be hard for her, things are going to be a struggle. You know, it's not very optimistic, but I believed it, you know, and I grew up in a society where at every turn I was told I wasn't good enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't strong enough, I wasn't smart enough. And for years I accepted that as my reality. I was incredibly shy and nervous and anxious and always embarrassed, wanting to hide away my arm and my scars. And yet, even though I felt all of those things, there was also this burning desire in me to push back and to prove people wrong, because I didn't want that to be my reality. I knew that I was capable of so much more. And thankfully, my parents were able to also push against some of the narrow-minded thinking of the professionals that they were dealing with at the time. And I remember them saying to me at a very young age, you know, we don't feel sorry for you, Jess, and you cannot feel sorry for yourself. There are so many wonderful opportunities in this world, and you have to go out and take them and make things happen for yourself. And now at times I wish perhaps they hadn't practiced such tough love so well, but I realised that they were doing that to help me. They were doing it to prepare me for life. And it's because of their approach that I was able to learn how to not make excuses based on my appearance. You know, if there was any task that seemed impossible, I first had to try before asking for help. And of course it built a level of resilience, but it also allowed me to quickly adapt and find my own way of doing things. And so I'm very grateful to my parents for giving me the space and the love to be able to do that and grow independently. One of the most obvious ways for me to prove to myself and the world around me that I could do things was to use my body. And so, you know, I would climb trees and I would go skating with my brothers. I was quite a tomboy. I would do everything that they were doing just to prove that I could. And the natural progression into sport. And I played all sorts of sports as a young kid. But interestingly, although probably not surprisingly, is that I didn't love team sport, because the messaging that I received was that I would always be the weakest link. I would always be the person to blame if the team didn't win. And so that was a burden that I carried, and I thought I just can't do that. I don't want to live with that extra responsibility. And so individual sport was a sport for me. And I loved swimming. I mean, growing up in Australia, I had a backyard swimming pool, and it was just so much fun. I felt free in the water. And I remember my first swimming race when I was just 10 years old. At school in Grafton. I had moved from Sydney to Grafton, which is a small town in the north coast of New South Wales in Australia. And I beat all the girls and boys with 2 arms. And it was amazing. Everyone was surprised, including me. And I remember feeling things that I'd never felt before at that age. I was exhilarated. I was so proud and I was so excited, because the first time in my young life, I felt as though I was being acknowledged for what I could do rather than what I couldn't. And I remember to my dad at that time, I want to swim forever. And he sort of didn't know what that represented or what that meant. And, you know, unfortunately for him, it was very early mornings driving me to the swimming pool, 4 o'clock starts for years and years. And I think he was very excited, you know, once I finally got my driving license. But I had a lot of natural talent. I really enjoyed swimming. It gave me an opportunity to prove myself and the rest of the world that I was capable rather than incapable. And so I remember being selected onto my first Australian swimming team at the age of 13. I was a baby of the team, and it was amazing getting to wear the green and gold so proudly, you know, and I continued to represent Australia for 7 consecutive years after that. And it was the most amazing experience of my life. But that journey for me wasn't a smooth Hollywood fairy tale where I went on to win a gold medal and live happily ever after. In fact, far from it. Because as a female living with a disability, I faced so much ridicule and discrimination along the way. And I felt it was also a basic lack of understanding about difference and disability. And what I felt was an obvious sense that no one was really interested in my dreams and my goals to represent my country. And in my early teens, I was forced to mature very quickly, because international travel at the age of 13 and 14 is very daunting, especially when you're expected to be an adult. I did learn about resilience, but I was also battling with this notion that even though I was wearing the green and gold, it still wasn't quite good enough. I still was too different. And I give you an example. I remember competing at the state championships, and I won six races, 6 gold medals. And I remember going to the dais to receive my medals and have the medal presentation. And they had the medals laid out on a table with the officials. And I noticed that the medals for the able-bodied athletes were bigger, and then the medals for the athletes with a disability were smaller. And I just remember thinking, why? You know, it represented so much to me, and it was hurtful and it was embarrassing, and it made me feel so small. And, you know, being a young teenage girl and having to try and process what that meant and what that represented is that I simply wasn't good enough. I simply wasn't at the same level. And when you're already hearing all of those messages from society anyway, when there was something that I loved so much and something that I enjoyed and something that just gave me so much happiness, to then feel that it wasn't seen in the same light as other people, it was heartbreaking. And there was no sponsorship for me for my entire swimming career. You know, I was having to do raffles and try and raise as much money as I could to wear the green and gold, you know, and that's very hard as well, to see that because I had a disability, I was somehow at a disadvantage and not seen at the same standard as an able-bodied athlete. Another example is at the national championships. I was preparing for the Sydney 2000 Paralympic and Olympic Games, and I was the last event of the evening. And unfortunately, at the time, to coincide with live broadcasting in Australia, the athletes with a disability were either put on at the very beginning of the evening or at the very end of the evening, so that we didn't clash with the live broadcast. They didn't want us to be seen. And I remember walking out on to pool deck for a very important race, but because the live broadcast and the presenters on deck had said, you know, thank you everyone and good night, the entire crowd was leaving. I was 14 or 15 at the time, and I remember walking out thinking, how am I supposed to feel important and worthy and validated and acknowledged right now? And I remember my coach just saying, you know, you just have to suck it up. You have to just keep going, forget about these things. But, you know, it's a lot to process as a 15-year-old, to try and stay so composed, but when you're feeling utterly heartbroken isn't easy. You know, I felt like I could do anything physically, but mentally I just probably wasn't mature enough to comprehend the enormity of what was expected of me at the time. And I'm not really sure why, but I couldn't differentiate. I would look at other athletes with a disability and they seem to be able to, you know, shrug it off. Perhaps they'd been ignored for so long that they were just used to it. But for me, it bothered me so much, because when I compared myself to my fellow able-bodied athletes, especially the athletes that I was training with, it just didn't make sense. You know, it was so frustrating to try and get someone to look at me for what I was doing. And unfortunately, I think that came across as though at times I was extrinsically motivated, you know, that I was only focused on the medals and the accolades, but that wasn't true. I just wanted to be seen. I just wanted somebody to say, wow, you know, that girl, Jessica, is putting in just as much effort, if not more. You know, I'm doing the same grueling training sessions as all the other athletes, but the recognition just isn't there. And when I was away from the pool, you know, it was so interesting. I was so depressed, because it was, even though it was frustrating, it was still that place of freedom. It was still that one place that ignited my self-confidence and my self-esteem and gave me a feeling of understanding self-respect as well. But it is a lot, you know, for a teenager to process. And I was a teenage girl with one arm and scarring. I didn't look like the models or the celebrities that I saw on television or in the magazines or on the movies. And so I convinced myself that if I could control the controllable when it came to my body, obviously my arm was never going to grow back and my scars were always going to be there. But if I could manipulate something, so if I could lose weight so that my body would fit within society's norms of what beauty is supposed to look like, then maybe people would see past my obvious imperfections. Maybe then I'd be accepted, and maybe then I'd be happy. And you know, it was a very sad and lonely time in my life where I felt that I needed to do that. I needed to find something in my life that I could hold on to, something that felt safe and gave me strength in many ways. But I just felt so overwhelmed, and I felt as though I was suffocating, no matter how loud or hard I screamed. And I mean that figuratively. I felt like no one could hear me. I had lost my way, and I was confused, and my sadness turned into resentment and anger. And I started to internalize a lot of those feelings. And at 15, I was officially diagnosed with anorexia, bulimia, and depression. And, you know, the sad thing is I remember my mum at the time saying, don't tell anyone about this. the shame and the guilt and the stigma that comes with having a mental illness and an insidious mental illness such as an eating disorder. It wasn't just felt by me, but it was felt by my parents. It was felt by my brothers as well. But it was awful because I felt like I had finally found my voice. I had finally spoken up to say, you know what, I'm not coping. I'm struggling here. But it was short-lived, because even though I had that diagnosis, I wasn't able to then give myself a voice moving forward. And so for just over a decade, I suffered in complete silence, and my mental health started to rapidly deteriorate. My eating disorder, pardon the pun, was literally eating me alive in many senses. But it was also my safety net. And, you know, I tried to speak very carefully, and this is why it's hard for me not to be able to engage my audience, but I try not to say anything that's ever too triggering when it comes to body image and eating disorder issues. But I'd become so dependent on familiarity, even though I was riddled with anxiety and shame and not eating and overeating and purging and knowing that I was slowly killing myself. It still felt safe. And on the outside, my life seemed amazing. You know, academically, I was doing so well. I had gotten early entry into university based on my marks. You know, things were going fantastic. I didn't even really have to do my end of year exams. And once I had gotten into uni, I was also then on a sporting scholarship. And so, you know, to everybody else, it seemed amazing, but behind closed doors was a completely different story. And I know that a lot of athletes struggle with that same mindset of, you know, what people see and then what's going on. You know, look, like I said at the beginning, looking beyond what we first see can be very hard for people. Fast forward to 2004, I had reached the height of my swimming career. I had landed in Athens as a member of the Australian Paralympic swimming team. I was 19. I was so excited. I was proud. I was nervous. My hard work and dedication had become a reality, and my entire family had flown from Australia to Greece to be there to support me. But unfortunately, the pressure and the expectation had all become too much, and my experience at the Paralympics was quite bittersweet. I was expected to medal in 3 individual events, but I was the only member of the Australian swimming team to not make a final. And I've only been able to actually publicly say that in recent years, because the failure and the shame and the disgrace that I felt was enormous. My career was over. I returned to Australia and I was actually admitted to a rehab facility to undergo treatment for my eating disorder, and I spent 6 weeks as an inpatient. I had hit my rock bottom. And it was so incredibly hard. But the cliche part of my story is that it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Closing the door of my swimming career was not easy, but it had reached a point where I had to do that in order to take that next step in my journey, in my life, in my path. And I had to trust the process of the unknown. And by doing that, I allowed myself to heal. I gave myself permission to say I'm not okay. And that's when, you know, that recovery process started. Soon after Athens, I was getting calls to come and speak about my Paralympic experience. And so I did. I would go to corporate events and schools and I would talk about what I thought the audience wanted to hear, you know, about how amazing the experience was and how proud I was and wearing the green and gold was so amazing, which it was. But I could sense that the audiences were starting to disengage because they could sense that I was being disingenuous. And I was. It was starting to feel fake and awkward and uncomfortable because I wasn't being genuine in the message that I was delivering. And so one day I decided to tell the real story, the story that I've told all of you tonight. And what I found was that people were instantly intrigued. You know, when I did present that true story, you could hear a pin drop. And I started getting more and more calls to share my unedited experience. And I realized that I had struck a chord. It was my vulnerabilities that were a light for so many others. And when I shared about my identity and body image issues, it was something that I realized other people could relate to, they could connect with. And I realized that I had a responsibility to be a voice for so many others. I wasn't able to give myself a voice at certain points along my career and along my journey, but I also felt that I wasn't given the opportunity or the safe place to do that. So I wanted to provide that for other people. Here I was, and here I am with this platform, and my story is important, but so are all of your stories. And so I began to think of ways in which I could encourage other people to share their stories in a way that they felt empowered and safe. And going back probably 10 years ago now, I created a social media campaign right at the beginning of Instagram called Join the Revolution. And the idea behind the campaign was that people would upload images of themselves with a sign that said, "Join the revolution, stop hating your body." And just to simply be a conversation starter about issues that were complex when it comes to body image. And overnight, I was beginning to be tagged in images from people I'd never met all over the world, from rural Australia to the streets of New York, famous people, athletes, actors. And I was like, wow, this is so much bigger than what I thought. And then there was an image of a group of young girls out the front of the Taj Mahal with my poster that they had somehow printed off. I don't even know how this message had got to them. And that's when I realized that it was no longer about me and my story, but it was about everybody else and their stories. And it made me realize even more so that body image, it's not about beauty and aesthetics. Body image is how we think and feel about our own appearance. And so that encompasses race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, disability, mental health, all of those things. And that's why so many people from around the world were able to resonate with the message. And still to today, when people hear that phrase body image, I think a lot of people don't really understand what it means. And so my mission and my journey is to help educate people to understand the complexities behind what body image actually means. And I was able to instigate a movement, a global movement, based on two really important factors. And the first one is communication. I pride myself in the fact that I genuinely listen to what people have to say. And, I go to talks, or I used to go to talks all around the world. And my husband would say, the talk finished an hour ago, like, where have you been? I'm like, no, I'm just sitting, talking to people, letting them have the opportunity for them to share their story. And I feel that that's really important. A lot of us, when we talk about communication skills, we forget that listening is the most important part of that. And the second aspect that enabled this movement to spread as it did was because I had a personal lived experience. And I think for people who are struggling with mental illness, whether it be an eating disorder or not, or whether you're struggling with difference, no matter what it is, you want to know that there are people who have not walked in your footsteps, but they've walked that journey, they've walked that path before you, and I was able to show people that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, that recovery was possible, and to be hopeful and to trust in a process and to trust in the unknown. And I'm very humbled that my work with this campaign and with body image campaigns that I've been doing for many years has been recognised, through various accolades. It's taken me a long time to feel comfortable accepting the awards and the accolades, because I never started out with that as the purpose, but certainly the validation is welcomed. And I think it's so funny, if I look back at my swimming career, knowing that on paper, people might say, oh, she wasn't a successful Paralympic swimmer, there's no gold medal. What's important for me is the parallels that I've been able to take from, being an athlete and what it takes to be an elite athlete, the goal setting, the determination, and being able to apply those things into everything that I do now, that's what's important. And, you know, being awarded an OAM, you know, I was a finalist for Young Australian of the Year, Cosmopolitan Woman of the Year, and there's a few others, and it's real, you can hear that I get, you know, quite awkward talking about it, but it is important as a female living with a disability, and now more so as a mother, to be proud of those achievements and to know that it simply validates what I'm doing and encourages me to keep going. And over the years, I've worked with various organisations when it comes to preparing content and workshops to help educate, whether it be children right through to medical professionals, about how to talk about these particular issues. But then as the years went on, you know, I was speaking to thousands and thousands of high school students in particular. I realised that I wanted to broaden, you know, the audiences that I was in front of. I wanted to talk to corporates about diversity and inclusion. You know, how can we have this conversation? How can we ensure that change is implemented and it actually occurs and has longevity? But also with young children. I became a mother. I have 3 young children, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and my son, who is 1 this week, very busy. But it was through their eyes that I realised I want to work in the preventative side of things. You know, how can I educate young children about the complexities of body image in a fun and simple way? And, you know, what will my legacy be? And I guess I give that question to all of you as well. You know, recently here in Dubai, we had the Year of Tolerance, and you know, I would like to hope that so many of you have, you know, had your mind and eyes open to new possibilities. But how do we ensure that those possibilities come to fruition? How do you ensure that the words such as tolerance and diversity and inclusion and difference remain in your vocabulary? For me, it was looking at my kids and realising that there's even more responsibility now for me to work in this space. And I looked around and realised that there weren't any resources or books for young kids that had characters that looked different. Certainly when I was growing up, there were no characters in the books that I were reading that had somebody that looked like me. And so I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book that's about diversity, but it's for kids. And so I wrote Little Miss Jessica Goes to School. And it is a beautiful story, essentially about me as the main character, a little girl with 1 arm on her first day at school. And she experiences what it's like to feel different, what it's like to be, you know, the odd one out, what it's like to be the minority. And through friendship and through conversation and through learning about one another, little Miss Jessica and her friends discover that, in fact, they're all different, but it's their differences that unite them. And I have to say that it has been such a wonderful opportunity for me to go and speak to much younger children. They are by far the best audience because they have no filter and they're unapologetic, which is what they should be. They ask questions and there's no hesitation, and it's beautiful. Whenever I do a book reading or go and talk to young kids, you know, the first question is, what happened to your arm? And when I say, I was born without it, they're so uninterested. They're like, oh, okay. And what usually follows is, oh, my mum has blonde hair. They try and find what aspects or characteristics I have that then they can relate to people in their life. And that's why it's so important for a book like this to exist, so that children who are different and for children who aren't different, they can say, oh, I know, I've met a lady, I've met a child with 1 arm, or who uses a wheelchair or glasses, or, you know, or their mind thinks differently, so that they can have that as a reference. And so it has been really my focus the last couple of years, and I'm excited that I have just secured publishing here. The book isn't available at the moment, sold out, but I'm republishing here in English and Arabic, so I will keep you all informed about that. But one of the beautiful things about teaching children about difference and diversity is how their mind allows them to think of possibilities. And it's important for us as parents and as adults to let that occur. So to give you an example, even with my own daughter, we were talking about a friend of mine who is a below knee amputee, both legs, double below knee amputee. And I said, she's got these amazing legs, thanks to science and technology. And I said to my daughter, she can run really fast. What would you do if you had legs like that? And she said, Mummy, I would make sure you had the remote control and I would tell you when to make me go faster or slower. I'd trick people, but then I'd always win the race. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I said, what else? It's amazing that it could make you go faster. And she goes, what if it could make me fly? And I get goosebumps even now, because imagine the mind of a child that sees difference and disability and sees advantage and sees hope in that way. It's so beautiful. And I hope that we can all encourage our children to continue to think that way. There's going to be so many opportunities in life where they're told that that's not possible. But for me, in that moment when I'm sharing my story, I let them think that way, because it's amazing. When I'm on stage or when I'm in the classroom, I will often take other things so that I can demonstrate to the kids how I do things like skipping or doing push-ups or tying my hair. But because I can't do that, what I do have now is a quick video which features my daughter, Isla, and I show how I do my hair and how I do her hair. So I might let that play now and give you all a break from listening to me. But here, I really hope that this video opens your eyes and perspective to a new way of doing things.
Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you how I do my hair, tie my hair up with one hand. So I have my hair tie and my hair is quite long at the moment. I'm fortunate that I have this part of my arm, so my elbow, and what that means is that I'm able to use this part of my arm to help me to do a lot of things like tying my hair. So I'm going to pull my hair at the back. I'm also fortunate that my hair is quite fine. And then this is just a very basic up style bun. I'm a mum of 3, remember? So nothing overly fancy about this, but this is a ponytail. So I'm using my arm to guide the hair up, and then I use this part of my arm to pull the band down, pull my hair through. Again, using that part of my arm to guide my hair, pull my arm through, my hair through, sorry, and then another time. Very rough ponytail, but nevertheless, there you go. Because I have relatively fine hair, I'm also able to put my hair up without a tie. So it's quite long at the moment as well, so you need to have relatively long hair to be able to do this, but I use my fingers to wrap it around into a bit of a twirl, and then twirl it like this and push the hair up in behind. Done. And then if you want, obviously that can be the start, and I can put a hairband in around it like this, again using my arm. And that's going to keep it in place. So that's another way of getting the bun in. Now, as a mother of a daughter, I want to show you how I do Isla's hair. So hello again, this is...
My name's Isla, and today my mommy's gonna show you guys how she puts my hair up in with one hand.
Okay, so you stand there, and this is school time now, so Isla has to wear her hair up. Do you want to face this way a little bit so everyone can see? So Isla has very curly hair, don't you? Yeah. Do you want to keep looking? Actually, it might turn you a tiny bit this way, so you got to stop looking at yourself. You look that way. I promise you can watch later. So again, I'm going to be using my arm to help guide the hair. Could you look straight ahead, please? Can you look straight ahead, please? You can look at yourself later. Straight ahead, please. Helps if the child is looking straight ahead. Straight ahead, please. Straight ahead. Okay, go. So I can show everyone how to do it. Otherwise, it's too difficult. Straight ahead, please. Go, quickly. This is what school mornings are like when we're getting ready, isn't it? Straight ahead, please. Go straight. Look. Straight ahead, please. Quickly.
It's funny when you say that.
Okay. Can you look this way? Okay. No, seriously. Can you look that way? Seriously. And then you can have a look after. So just move forward a tiny bit. Okay. So people can see. Okay, I'm already bending down as it is to get in the camera. So I have the tie around my 4 fingers. I'm going to use it just the same as I'm assuming somebody with 2 hands uses a hair tie. Okay, so I'm grabbing her hair, and then I do use my arm and
Yeah.
stop. You need to go this way so that everyone can see how I'm doing this. Otherwise, it's not going to get done. And then using my arm to pull the hair tie over. Can you just turn the other way so everyone can see? And then turn this way so everyone can see. That's it. Pull the hair through, guiding with my arm, and then right through, and then another twirl. I think that's it for today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Done.
So, as you can see, also motherhood makes things challenging. And I think as a mother, a lot of people assume that having one arm is the most challenging thing. But just like all parents, the struggle is real, regardless of my physical appearance or ability. I might now just quickly go back to my slide because I wanted to, and I know we're almost running out of time. So if it's possible to put the presentation back up, and basically we know the phrase "don't judge a book by its cover," and yet we all do, even I do. But it's important that we understand that when we do make assumptions about ourselves and about each other, we reduce ourselves to objects rather than people. So the question is, how do we ensure that we can continue to practice a life that celebrates diversity and inclusion? And we have to listen. We have to invite people to the table who have a lived experience, people from, all minority groups across all cultures, ethnicities, people with something to say, but it's more important than having something to say is giving people the space to do that and allowing them the resources and the tools to implement things and to help affect real positive change. It's no good having a boardroom full of men making decisions about issues that impact women. We're all evolving from that, right? The same applies to all minority groups. So moving forward, no more assumptions based on the way that people look. People with a disability are just people. We have to stop viewing disability through a medical model or a medical lens. We are not, nor are our disabilities problems that need to be fixed. Now, that's not saying that cures and treatment aren't important. Of course they are, but it goes beyond that. It goes to a level where we have to celebrate awareness and education so that our quick assumptions stop marginalising people based on their appearance. The next slide I have is a definition of what disability is. A disability is any condition that restricts a person's mental, sensory, or mobility functions. It may be caused by accident, trauma, genetics, or disease. A disability may be temporary or permanent, total or partial, lifelong or acquired, visible or invisible. Disabilities are diverse, incredibly diverse, and the rates of disability are increasing due to our ageing population and the increase of chronic illness. There are over 1 billion people living with a disability of some sort. That's 15% of the global population. So, it would suggest that, in fact, disability isn't uncommon. Some people might even argue that 15% is a variant of normal. Everyone listening tonight will experience disability, whether personally or with somebody that you love. The thing is that we are more disabled by the way society views us than what our bodies look like or what they're capable of. I want to give you a funny example. My friend Kate, who is a double-leg amputee, we were at an event, Kate and I, and our other mutual friend, Sarah, who does not have a disability. And I remember saying to Kate, I was like, something's different about you. You know, are you taller? And she was like, yes, I have these new amazing legs. And I added a little bit of height and, you know, now I'm so tall. And we were sort of giggling. And our friend Sarah was like, that's not fair. And we both just were like, what do you mean it's not fair? And it stayed with me forever, because it's like, imagine if disability was actually something that gave people an advantage. And certainly in the times we're living with science and technology, and the fact that there's so many great advantages that are being made when it comes to, you know, what's available for people living with a disability. You know, you can print 3D printers of arms for young children who up until now, her parents haven't been able to afford it. I mean, it's just amazing. And so if we can start to shift our thinking to, rather than like Sarah, where she sees it as an unfair advantage, but, you know, to look at it with a bit of humour and hope. Because when you look at me, I want you to see my disability. I want you to see my scars, because they are part of me. They do define me, and I'm okay with that. But I also want you to see the mother, the author, the wife, the athlete, the activist. But you can't know those things about me just by taking a first look. So if we go to the next slide, which is the final slide, all of the people that you see in this final image are people that I'm sure you know of, or most of you will know of, and they all have a condition that's considered a difference or a disability. But I want you all to leave tonight with an idea of how can you look beyond what you first see. And an activity or a task or some homework is, I want you to start complimenting people based on nothing to do with their appearance. You know, we all say, oh, lovely hair, lovely dress, lovely nails, lovely makeup, or you're looking fit, you've lost weight. Can we try and change our language and our terminology and our vocabulary? Let's look for the scientist, the actor, the singer, the artist, the athlete, the activist. Let's look for the person. Thank you. I hope that was. I have my social media as well. So if anyone has taken, you know, photos or any video of this, please tag me, please share it, because that's the way that I can then engage and know that, you know, it's been well received. And I hope that, you know, one day soon I get to really connect with you all in person. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything. It's an honour for me to be able to take your time this evening to share part of my story. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm going to hand over to Mike Wilson, our principal, to do the final words.
Jessica, thank you. Trying to sort of tie together what to say, and it reminds me of a talk I think I gave when I first started at Cranleigh, which was really standing up in front of parents and talking to them about how we are all unique because we have a different fingerprint. So every single person that's born has a different fingerprint. But with that difference, with that fingerprint difference, comes vulnerability, because the difference starts to get us to question. We compare. And then I think in modern life, particularly with social media, the social media pushes that comparison out to a much wider audience. And I think it's that is the difficulty, is as you grow up, you are vulnerable. Human beings have a habit of pulling people down rather than lifting themselves up to them. And I think it's very, very easy to go into a mode of looking for differences. And I suppose the encouragement that I have, running sort of boarding houses in UK schools, is watching children who are different, younger children who are different, having a hard time initially, but watching them as they got to maturity and as they got to the end of the school, how much integrated and how much central they were. I sent a Facebook message to an autistic boy I had in my house, and I still remember him because on everybody's birthday, he always went and got somebody. He went round the school and got everybody to sign the card. And I look at him now as an adult, and he's really quite a special person. But he became the central part of the house. So I have a lot of that gives me encouragement. But I also think that the COVID time, and I think what we've had to do, what COVID has done is it's introduced parents into the classroom. And it's introduced classroom to modern techniques. And I think we've got a chance now, because instead of just simply teaching, because we were brought up in a generation that thought in a particular way, we're actually having to break the mold and come out of that and not teach what our parents taught us and what their parents taught them. So I think there's a challenge to it. And I hope that moving forward as a society and moving forward as a school and moving forward in this part of the world, which has such diversity, so many people of different nationalities, colours, creed, etc., that are respected in their own right. I hope that we've got the basis. Now, on Wednesday, we tape our National Day tape. And one of the things that I was going to talk about is the concept of how do we create the mind that allows the challenge to the norm and the confidence to go out and actually make a difference. I think that's what you've given us, and I do hope a lot of the pupils will get to see this and have seen this tonight, is actually challenging that. Because I think what you've said and the journey that you've been through isn't actually massively different from the journey that all of us go through. We just have a different disability or a different difference that we have to cope with and we have to adapt to. So I think you brought it to a level that allows us to look at it like that. So there's hope that the new generation will make that difference moving forward. So thank you. That was a bit rambly. It's a bit of a end of a long day, but I hope you get what I'm saying. And really a massive thank you, because that's been very thought-provoking and really a very good stepping stone for us to move forward as a community. So thank you very much. And we hope to get to meet you in person before too long.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I think just to end, I'm celebrated because of my differences, not in spite of them. And I think that's a message that especially, children and adolescents need to be reminded of. That everything that's happened in my life and all the amazing opportunities that I've had have been because of the one thing that for so long I was worried about. And in actual fact, it's the one thing that has led me here tonight. And the opportunity to speak to all of you is a fact that I have this difference, and it's the difference that I am most proud about and would never change.
Thank you.